It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Hello, welcome back to A Boring Revolution, your number one news source for everything in regards to The Boring Company. I'm back to you with another episode, one of my favourite topics. What else can The Boring Company do? There's lots of potential opportunities there. I can think of at least 5 or 6 off the top of my head. I'm sure more inventive people can think of a few more. But obviously, the focus should be on mass transit. For the next 8 to 10 years, all the focus should be on mass transit. That is the golden goose. That is where the big money is. That is where the problem is in terms of soul-destroying traffic. So, what else can we do? And what are we going to talk about today? So, look at all these countries here. There's something in there that potentially links them all together that's not quite so obvious. And that is that they all have issues with flooding. Flooding is a big problem worldwide. Pretty much every country in the world, other than a few desert nations, maybe Mongolia. There's a few places that are not affected by floods, but there are big problems coming down the line. As you know, the Earth is warming. We are getting more severe weather events. And when I talk about severe, I mean really quite bad. I'm not sure if you're aware, there was a major incident in the UK yesterday where a train derailed and 3 people unfortunately lost their lives, and that was caused by severe rainfall. And today it's just been dry as a bone, and that's the issue. It's very extreme from day to day, season to season. Flooding is a growing problem worldwide in many countries, and heavy sustained rainfall is becoming more and more extreme. Flash flooding. This is not an experimental concept. To put rivers or divert rivers, or to take flow away from rivers and to take that on another route away from where it is originally going. One thing I will say is it's just going to become a huge problem in the next 20 to 30 years. Really big problem. And this is an opportunity, once the Boring Company becomes established, to maybe get into something that plays on its core competencies of building tunnels quickly and cheaply and efficiently. And they also don't need to worry about putting systems inside those tunnels. So it only really becomes viable when it can be done for around 8, maybe slightly more, $8.5 million dollars per mile. This example here cost a lot more, but because the flooding was always very severe, it was money well spent. It would definitely improve the lives of many people marooned in flood-prone areas, because if you are a very poor person and you live in this particular area and you have no option but to live there, you are just going to have to adapt to the flooding. And if that means you lose your livelihood, it's the sad state of affairs that is going to occur every time you have a flash flood. Now, the Smart Expressway 38 is a project that was constructed in Kuala Lumpur. It's a very interesting project. I'll put a link in the comments below about a video that I watched about this project. I was made aware of this project maybe around 8 or 9 years ago. Very interesting. I think there's a lot of things to be learned from this project for the Boring Company if it intends to get into this field. So the project in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia was completed in June 2007. Doubles as both a toll road and a flood prevention tunnel. That's the unique thing about this tunnel, is that during most of the year it is used as a toll road only, and it is bone dry inside. But then during those very heavy flash floods and during the rainy season, it is used as a flood prevention tunnel as well. So it has a double deck system, so it actually has cars on 2 levels, and then underneath that it has space for water flow as well. So the actual double deck system that carries the cars is 2.5 miles long, and the actual section that covers the so it's 2.5 miles plus 3.5 miles for water diversion, but 3.5 miles is just purely for the water diversion and not for cars. It cost $515 million to build, so that works out as $85.83 million per mile, which is quite big, really quite big. And that's just a tunnel. There's no stations in that. That is a very, very big tunnel. I should know this, but I think it's about 34 foot in diameter, maybe slightly bigger. So it's a big old tunnel. Has 3 modes of operation. So normal mode, the tunnel just acts as a toll road. It is bone dry, no one's in there. When there is a minor storm, it allows water to go into the bottom, the invert of the tunnel. And not a great deal of water, but enough to kind of keep river levels fairly low. If you then have a major storm, it then uses the entire tunnel for water diversion. Smart Tunnel has proven successful as Lebo Ampang and Jalan Melaka have witnessed 0 flooding incidents in over 12.5 years. So since this project's been built, it has prevented all floods. So that is a really good sign, very good sign. So it has definitely earned this money back, because you think of the money that you lose when you can't open your business or your apartment gets flooded and all your possessions are essentially damaged or destroyed. So it is definitely worth its weight in gold. What a great little project that was. A great example of civil engineering making the lives of people better than it already was. So here's our cross section. As you can see, stormwater is down here, and most of the time that is the only area that is used for water. So 80% of the time this is just purely a toll road, and then the other 20% of the time they use it for flood diversion, and it's very, very rarely the entire thing. Okay, so let's go to our example where I think there is a great opportunity for the Boring Company, and this is in relation to this area here, or this river. This is a very famous river in the UK. It is certainly the most flood prone river in the UK. It follows a very, very scenic route, a very beautiful place to live, but it's fed by many, many tributaries, lots of tributaries, going into the river from various places. And what that causes is flooding near enough at the moment every year, at least every 2 years. Back 50 years ago, it might flood every 5 years. Now it's pretty much every 1 to 2 years. And this is, if just out of interest, this is Tewkesbury Cathedral here. Okay, so case study. River Severn is a major problem in England. The government really is not doing very much about it, and the solutions that they've come up with, they have built some flood defences, but what that has done is just taken water, pushed it downstream, and then caused issues in the wrong places. And because they don't want to continue building that flood defence, it's just the people that can least deal with the flooding are the ones that are getting flooded on a daily basis. So the River Severn frequently floods, causing very heavy financial losses to everyone. That includes the government, who often have to bail out people. People don't pay the business rates because the properties are closed because they're flooded. People lose tons and tons of their possessions because they get damaged during floods. So overall, it's not a good thing. For no one benefits. Not even the insurance companies benefit, because it's just a loss maker. Residents are trapped and unable to sell their properties. If you're trying to get a mortgage in this area, or remortgage your property, or buy a property, the banks are not going to lend to you. You're going to have to buy with cash. If you own a property here and you want to move, game over. You are stuck unless you're willing to take, a huge, 50% discount and a cash sale. You are stuck in this area. You're just stuck. There's no option but to stay or just abandon your house. Insurance has become very unaffordable. The insurance companies taking advantage of people, but to be fair to the insurance companies, they have no other option because it is flooding all the time. So rather than constantly having to pay out to people and lose money, they just ramp up the insurance rates up to the point that a lot of people in this area don't even bother to get insurance because it is just so expensive. The area is considered a very risky place to invest and businesses struggle, so it's just a terrible place to own property. As conditions worsen, so global warming, more severe weather events, this requires a heavy engineering solution. And you know me, I love nothing more than a good piece of heavy engineering, whether that be tunnels, bridges, skyscrapers, you name it. I love heavy engineering. So the UK government has set out its budget for the next 5 years, and it plans to spend 5.2 billion on flood defences and coastal defences. Now the majority of that is coastal defences, around it's just under 3 billion is on coastal defences. But the fact that there's such a large budget for flood defences means that there's money on the table. It's up for grabs in the UK. I'm not sure about other European countries, but I know they have big flooding problems as well. So I'm presuming that this is an opportunity across the European Union, across the UK, Ireland, USA, Canada. Examples, plenty of examples. Just before we move on to the next slide, my great-great-granddad worked on this bridge here. This is Iron Bridge, a very famous bridge in the UK. It's one of the first wrought iron bridges ever built in Europe. So, this is the plan. This is my idea for how you could potentially reduce the probability of flooding to very, very low levels. There may be still a small possibility of flooding, but with further improvements you can reduce it to almost zero. So there is a reasonably large town on the banks of the River Severn. It's got a reasonably decent football team, but other than that it's not really that famous for anything. But Shrewsbury has become a little bit famous because it gets flooded, and there's lots of people living here. That means there is lots of potential money for flood defences. So a good place for the boring company to start would be in a medium-sized town like Shrewsbury. There are lots of other places along the River Severn, Iron Bridge, Bewdley. There's a couple of other places, Worcester, lots of places in Gloucester as well, Gloucestershire. So in terms of the best opportunity, I think this is probably the best one to start off with. So it wouldn't be a massive tunnel, it'd be 4,295 metres. That is the main tunnel. However, you would have lots and lots of side tunnels linking in. So as you can see, there are lots and lots of tributaries, that flowing in. There's one, here's one here. There's one here as well. That's one there. So there are tons and tons of tributaries feeding into this river. There's one there. Here's another one. So there's lots and lots of places where water is flowing in. What we can obviously do is tap into these tributaries. So there's one tributary. Well, it'd be more like that. So you could tap in there. You could tap in there. You could also pull water out of the river here. And here. And here. So you've got lots of places where you're taking water out of the river. You're reducing the river levels. Most of the time, this tunnel would be at 5% capacity. There'd be very, very little water going through this tunnel. However, when the when water levels rise above a certain amount, you'd want to divert part of the flow, not all the flow, around 20 to 30% of the flow of the River Severn in this particular area, and take it down here. As you can see, there's lots of meanders in this river. This here at some point would form an oxbow lake, but it never will because there's flood defences either side. But the tunnel could move quite a lot of water. It would protect this area, the centre of Shrewsbury, 99% of the time. However, and it's an important thing to note, is that it would then cause problems over here, unfortunately. But there are less than 200 people that live in this area, and there's around 50,000 people that live in this area. So if you think 50k versus there's around 200 in this area, I think there's an obvious solution there. So here's the main part of our tunnel. All the water's going to flow into this area. This area south of Uffington, this is going to become our new our area that potentially, could get, it's going to be a floodplain. Essentially, we're going to move flooding from this area and round here, and we're going to move it over here. So that might involve some kind of flood defences down here in terms of walls, but this area here is where we're going to take any flood waters, and thus it'll affect a lot less people. Everyone's insurance rates will come down in this area and encourage more economic development, and the government would pay for this kind of scheme because it's saving them money. So is this viable? Yes, absolutely viable if the cost per mile is under $8 million. And you're probably saying, well, Will, it already is under $8 million because you keep telling us it's 7.7. Well, we're going to have to use a bigger tunnel. So this tunnel is just over 18 feet in diameter. Most of the time, let's change my pen. Most of the time, the water level in the tunnel would be around here. But during flood season, it potentially could be all the way up here. So, you know, that's at least 15 foot higher. So its normal level would be this. Its upper level would be this. Very viable. So, what are the specs? How are we going to make this work? How are we going to make this affordable? How are we going to sell this to the UK government? Number one, we can't use the current 14-foot diameter tunnel. It's just not fit for purpose. Now, these kind of projects for the Boeing company potentially would be happening in the next 8 to 10 years. So it gives them an opportunity to perfect the 14-foot diameter tunnel and then come up with a system for an 18-foot diameter tunnel. It's just over 18 foot, 1.5 inches. So they have to develop a new system for a new size tunnel. The cost's going to go up because it's a bigger tunnel, there's more spoil, there's more concrete segments, etc, etc. But obviously if we can recycle that spoil into bricks, that's going to bring the costs down dramatically. So I'm confident that the Boeing company could do an 18-foot diameter tunnel, or external diameter tunnel, for under $8 million in the future, in 8 to 10 years time. So 5.5 metres diameter, main tunnel. The tunnel would be run at a 1 in 3 gradient or better. It depends obviously on the topography of the land. Ideally you'd want it to be 1 in 250, 1 in 200, so a nice gradient so the water is flowing through the tunnels at a rapid rate. Obviously the faster the water runs through that tunnel, the more flooding that is going to happen at the other end of that tunnel. But if you've built a good sized floodplain in that area and there's not many people living in that area, ideally 0 people, then it's not going to be a massive issue. And in fact people will be happy with that because they'd rather that area floods than their homes. So there'll be various secondary tunnels with sluice gates for rapid flood diversion. So Most of the tunnels will be fully open all the time, but there would be then secondary tunnels that feed off the tributaries that run into the River Severn, and they would have sluice gates, and then you would obviously try and divert as much water into the tunnel as you possibly can via those sluice gates during a flood scenario. So almost as important as the main tunnels and the secondary tunnels are sustainable floodplains. So you need to move the flooding to different areas. You need to isolate those areas and define them as floodplains, prevent people building there, and allow the rivers to naturally overflow into those areas rather than flooding the centre of Shrewsbury. And that might mean that certain people who own that land, like the farmers, might have to, you know, the government might very well have to pay them off when flooding occurs, or maybe all year round, who knows. But that is a better solution for more people if there is less flooding. Obviously, if flooding starts to get worse because of more extreme weather events, you could add additional tunnels. Now, after you've done the first tunnel, you don't necessarily need to use an 18 foot or 5.5 meter diameter tunnel. You could then start using your smaller kind of standard boring company tunnels, so 14 foot diameter tunnels, and you could do that underneath the main tunnel. You could have passages leading into that tunnel from the main tunnel, so you're constantly forcing water through the system. Because that tunnel is deeper, that means you can get a better gradient, maybe a 1 in 200 gradient there, and then that means you're going to force more water around Shrewsbury and into your sustainable floodplains. Okay, so that essentially is the idea. Obviously, we want the boring company to focus on mass transit. That is the most interesting area, but there are millions of people every year who are affected by flooding. This is potentially an opportunity. It's a very good opportunity because essentially you'd be paid via the government, certainly in the UK. I'm not sure about the USA and other parts of Europe, but certainly in the UK. The UK government would give you a nice piece of cash that you could then spend on these kinds of things. So in terms of the Shrewsbury Tunnel, you know, we're talking maybe just under £100 million of investment, but you're not having. It's well worth it because you're having to shell out loads of money to insurance companies, and you're not having to worry for 3 months of the year that you're going to get flooded. So all in all, I think it's a very good idea. I hope you all agree. Okay, so please come and join me on social media. Our Boring Revolution is available on Discord, Twitter and Instagram. I'd appreciate some feedback on flood protection. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think the boring company should focus on other things? Do you think my plans for how to do it are wrong and there might be a better way to do it? Maybe there's a more natural way that we can prevent flooding. You know, leave your thoughts down below. And it has just crashed. No, it's not. Thank God. Okay, so I have some new Patreons. I'd just like to thank all my old Patreons as well for